right, welcome back to Honest Voice Podcast, the Honest Voice Podcast. I'm Todd.
And I'm Carolsue. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about family patterns, specifically the hidden rules that shape how we use our voice.
Right. This is where we think that we're a little different than the average kind of self-help book or family intervention book. Is that our big thing with Honest Voices is that we identify a problem, we identify why it's a problem, we offer an alternative that's better than the bad way or the problematic way, for lack of a better phrase. And then we identify steps to try to maintain that, to get better at speaking more clearly and speaking more effectively. So one of the things we work really hard to do is that we don't believe in calling people out. We don't believe in insulting others, that even when it comes to impacting others, like we will talk about bullies and that as a title to a type of behavior, but we work really hard to identify that everything that we do is not personality. It's not part of us. It's a behavior that we've learned. And that's what's really, really important, because I've already disclosed I came from a very volatile background. But the one thing that I have to remember is that those that basically were part of my volatile background, that was also the tools that they were given when they were learning to communicate. So those are the things. It doesn't make it okay when it's violent or aggressive or just constant negativity or meanness. But the fact of the matter is that when it comes to communication tools, it's very easy to pass down dysfunctional tools. You know, that's the way we did it, that's the way you're going to do it, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
And we're here to tell you that if you can become aware of these patterns, and so if you can see the damage that they're contributing to, then that's the first step in turning it around. So think about this as these are communication patterns that are learned by all of us.
Absolutely.
And it takes a major disruption like our podcast to make you think from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think we all try to do the best we can with what we have and with the skills that we've learned. And there are things that have been modeled for us since we were very, very little that we may not even realize, because learning starts to happen before we're even aware it's happening.
Yeah.
And the first people that most of us learn from are our family of origin, the people we grow up with. So before we even have the language ability to really understand what we're learning, we're picking up the models that are around us and using that as a baseline for our own behavior. And it's not until later that maybe we realize that some of these behaviors and communication patterns aren't serving us so well.
Yeah, and that's really important to understand. So just a quick overview, these communication patterns, they are learned. We absorb them. They're put on us. We don't get a manual. We don't go to a special school that teaches us how to communicate as a kid, as an adolescent, as an adult, as a family member, as a parent, as a teacher, as a leader. There aren't schools that teach you how to communicate effectively unless they're very specifically geared toward that. Also, that just because we've learned those patterns just is not disrespectful to say that our parents weren't effective in teaching us communication skills. It's an identifiable fact. If it's causing you a disruption, then it might be dysfunctional. This is not saying anything bad about parents.
Definitely not.
A lot of people will dig in and will get the perception that, well, if I don't do the same way that my parents did, then that means I'm rejecting them or disrespecting them.
Yes.
And that's not how it is. We want to be people that improve ourselves as we go along. We want to learn from our mistakes. We want to learn from our parents' mistakes, because it's not really on the people, but everything changes around them. So patterns that were taught to them served a purpose during that time, based on the environment, based on what they were dealing with, and that's all they know. So they carry those patterns forward without realizing that the next generation doesn't have the same parameters.
Yeah.
Things are very, very different. So just because they were handed down to us, it doesn't mean that they were healthy. The inherited patterns that we learn, even as a child, they become the default patterns. Because as children, everything that our parents says is law, and we mimic those things. We do exactly what they say till we get to a certain age, of course. And then those are foundational patterns, and really what happens is we either build on them. So even if they're dysfunctional, in some cases they become more dysfunctional as adults. They don't just suddenly disappear. The main thing is that what we're doing here is we're creating a certain level of awareness, and it's up to you.
Yes.
One thing that we really stress, even when we do our crisis intervention trainings, is, our advice is freely given, freely ignored. Yeah. So we're not pushing it on anybody. We have made these mistakes, sometimes horribly. Sometimes the mistakes and dysfunctional conversations have ended valuable relationships because of the miscommunication, the differences in our styles. And we're just trying to help others not feel that kind of pain. And when you're at a tipping point with a relationship, maybe these tools will help you reconnect rather than decide it's over.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to make life a little bit easier, because even though these are cycles, like your parents got it from their parents got it from, and so on, cycles can be interrupted. A big tagline in survivors of childhood abuse is, break the cycle. Whatever it is, don't repeat what happened to you with the next generation, with your children, things like that. And we've always worked hard to try to improve the quality of life for those around us rather than impact it negatively. From this point on, I have made serious mistakes in the past where that wasn't the intent, and honestly, it's not an excuse, but I didn't know any other way. I mean, it's just, if somebody wronged me, I would get them back. If somebody said something to me I didn't like, I would tell them I don't like it. And that wasn't effective. That's not growth. I mean, it never improves another person to say, you're being an idiot right now. Nobody goes, oh, wow, yeah, I was being an idiot. You're right. I should stop that.
Let me stop being an idiot.
And let me think of a better way so I'm not an idiot anymore. It just doesn't work that way. The only way to really get somebody to change their behavior is to basically influence them in such a way by modeling that behavior to where it becomes something that they want to do. Pressure never works, because for every push,
there's a pushback.
There's a pushback. See, we've done this quite a few times. All right.
So we give this disclaimer because we know that it can hit people right at home when we start to talk about communication patterns that might have not been the healthiest that some of us grew up with. And as Todd said, this is by no means a slight or a slam on anyone's family. All we can do is take the new information and choose whether there are things we might want to adjust. So in order to do that, we have to shine a little light on some of the patterns that we may not even realize are patterns in family communication.
Yeah.
So if you think about some of the phrases you might have heard in your family home growing up, this is just how we talk in this family. We're loud. We tell people how we feel. This is just how we talk. That gives you the feeling that this is the only way, and there's nothing we can do to change that. And what we found is that as you learn more information, you can make choices about how you want to move forward.
Right. And we already went over how silence hurts.
Yes.
In a lot of families, we don't talk about that. And I have to say this, and I'm going to keep stressing this, and I might get a lot of pushback, but I mean it sincerely and I mean it endearingly, is that if you're a male and there's something you can't talk about, that's not a strength. If you're saying, we don't talk about that, or I don't go there, or we don't discuss our feelings, that's a deficit. Because if you're in a family system, your family needs you to model effective behavior. There are a lot of issues that people have with relationships nowadays, and those are all adult level functions of child foundational communication styles. So what they learned as a child is being expounded on and expanded. That's probably what I wanted, and I created a hybrid that was still a word, but it's being expanded at the adult cognitive level, but they don't realize that it's destructive. Even in the face of saying something inappropriate and getting rejected, and then trying the next relationship, saying the same thing and getting rejected, and then saying the same thing again and getting rejected, it never clicks that maybe I'm doing something wrong here. Because like I mentioned in a previous show, if you are saying, how many times do I have to tell you, the problem might be the way you're delivering it. It might not have anything to do with their ability to listen or remember. And then again, I will also add that shaming somebody does not improve their memory. So when you start giving people a hard time because they forget things, it's time to learn tools that can help them remember. But shaming never improves memory, and we do that one a lot. We get completely angry because somebody forgot something, and maybe there are valid times where it's disappointing that they didn't put tools in place to try to remember, with having Outlook, having reminders, having now AI things where you can just create your own reminders, and they're very simple. You just have to say it now. But still, just remember that the best thing you can do in those situations is coach and encourage on how to improve your memory, but shaming somebody for forgetting is not going to improve that situation at all.
No, absolutely right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the most common family communication styles. First one that comes to mind is the loud and confrontational style of communication. So with this, you may have grown up in a household with a lot of raised voices, people who talked over each other, interrupted each other, and maybe that underlying message came through that if you have something important to say, you better say it loud.
And right now, there is a massive influence on that. Like, you can't turn on the news and watch a clip in the news about anything where somebody isn't trying to over assert themselves. And the bottom line is, if you're having to speak loudly, it sort of shows that you're not completely sure about your information. You're trying to force it rather than actually supply it. But the interesting thing is, on the flip side of that is, is that we have a tendency to subconsciously believe somebody who looks more in authority than somebody who is an actual authority, because
So true.
yeah, because a lot of the words that are used, it's really interesting when you watch it, is like people that are authorities on certain things, they will say the data supports, and I think we brought this up in an early one, but the data supports this, and based on our studies this, and people are like, oh, they probably don't know what they're doing. And what they're actually saying is all information is improvable.
Yeah.
There are waves of information based on studies that come out, and we know that what we're saying right now might change tomorrow. But those that act completely certain of what they're doing, they're not always correct. So you'll see them force that with a loud voice or an assertion. This happens in the workplace quite a bit. Certain individuals think they need to make their point, but if somebody is losing control in that moment by trying to control everyone else to be silent, that's not a real credible source of information, and that's something to keep in mind. One of the things that I think that shows more credibility is when you can maintain your composure and there's not a certain level of defensiveness.
That's true.
Because that defensiveness is a byproduct of extreme insecurity. So just saying this is the best we can do, this is what we think at the moment, is actually a much more credible resource than somebody screaming at you that they know it all and they've been doing this for years.
Yes. And interestingly, when going back to our crisis training for just a minute, when someone is in crisis, if they are yelling and shouting, if you want to regain control of the situation as the responder, as the crisis helper, your best bet is to lower your voice and calm your tone, because the person who's yelling will be interested in what you're saying and will need to bring their own volume down to hear you. So even in that instruction, it's implicit that yelling and shouting is not necessarily the best way to get your information across.
Yeah, and if it's a panic situation, to expound on that, it also shows that information's in the reactivity area. So that's also where the irrationality is, which is lack of rational understanding of your subject matter. So getting it back to the frontal cortex and speaking in terms that are basically constructive and building is where you want to be at all times. The interrupting thing is also, when people are constantly interrupting, it's because they're insecure about their material and they want to make a scene in the moment to distract everybody back to them from whoever's talking in that moment.
That's right.
People that are truly comfortable with their information will show the respect of speakers and let them complete what they're saying and then provide that whatever their information is. But also a lot of people don't really listen effectively, and they're usually thinking about what they want to say next while the
in
person's
response.
talking.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people believe that volume equals importance, but it's really identifying a certain level of insecurity in what you're saying. If you have to present it harder to make people believe it, I mean, that's just logical. If you have to present it harder to make people believe it, then there's something suspect about that you may not be completely confident in your own information.
That's right.
But if you just do the like, hey, this is the info, take it or leave it, do with what you want, like we say, freely given, freely ignored, then those are usually your more competent and more useful information coming from individuals like that.
So that's one type of family background, is that loud and confrontational sort of style of communication. The next we're going to talk about for a minute is avoidant and silent communicators. So this is where we just don't want to talk about hard things. So we're just going to ignore difficult topics. Maybe as you as a child grew up into your teenage years, maybe your parents avoided talking about the birds and the bees altogether instead of trying to have an informed conversation about questions you might have or give advice.
Yeah, which is really interesting because, I mean, I find this interesting because it's something that as an adult, everyone does or knows about, but we act like we don't. So this goes back to the honest voice thing. We really think that's problematic. If we would normalize this kind of behavior and just discuss it, not just clinically, but also experientially, things that I've dealt with, my mistakes, my problematic issues. Things are awkward because we have decided they're awkward.
That's so true.
And we've passed that down to others. We've said it's awkward. We've reinforced that it's awkward. Now everybody says it's awkward when it's just information. It's just data. And if you can separate that subjective or opinionated labels on these things, then the communication would improve quite a bit.
Yes.
Like, we have to work harder to make these conversations normal.
And comfortable.
Yeah. And they have to be comfortable because we transmit that discomfort down to the next generation. And that's why they make mistakes. That's why there's teenage pregnancies, because we hide that information and they don't know how to navigate it at their level. So I believe it's a major contributor to unwanted teenage pregnancies and things like that, because there's just not enough solid information that they can act on. I mean, I have known adults that honestly believed that certain aspects of intimacy is how pregnancies occurred. And we're trying to keep this show in the G-rated level, so we're picking and choosing our words on that.
Yes.
But honestly, thought that certain, I'm just going to say kissing, could actually cause pregnancy. So anything else was okay. And I mean, this was an adult. This was a 23-year-old individual that told me this. And that's not a single case.
No,
and that's exactly why it's so important that we do exercise more honesty in our communication, more kind, and identify that this is just data. There are definitely subjects that we don't want to discuss. I mean, there's a lot of ugliness out there that a kid doesn't need to be exposed to at this age. But those protective factors are really important. A lot of people will claim that they don't want to tell their kid about that because they don't want them to be fearful. But that's a problem. So teach them about the information, teach them how to protect themselves, and teach them how to be confident in handling those situations. But hiding it from them is making them vulnerable.
Yeah, and the other thing that's true about most topics is that if we avoid because we think, oh man, if I try to talk to my kids about drugs, then they're going to know about drugs and how to get them. It's pretty well known that by the time our kids are pre-adolescents and adolescents, most of the information they're getting is from their friends groups and probably the internet these days also. So the best thing we can do as caring parents is not to avoid those conversations. And you can even start it by saying, look, I know this might be a little uncomfortable. I'll be honest, this is new for me too, but I want us to keep an open dialogue, and I want you to feel like you can come to me about anything, and if I don't know the answer to your question, then we'll figure it out together.
Exactly.
But if we set up the precedent that we're going to avoid uncomfortable things, then our kids will have no choice but to go and seek that information somewhere else, and then it might not be the information that you want them to have, and they might not know all of the parameters or the dangers or all the information you'd like them to have.
Yeah, and we are in an age right now, and I don't want to get too much into the clinical data about it, but we are in the age right now where coping is at a deficit. So what's happening is that the kids that were affected by the pandemic, they don't know how to sit with discomfort. And they're looking for immediate satisfaction in these moments of discomfort, which is an amazing gap. And I don't say that in a positive way, but it's an amazing gap in coping skills because they don't know how to regulate themselves, and we're not helping them do that. Kids are losing their temper because they lose a pencil, or because their book is not where they put it, or they can't find something. And the key issue when it goes to what we were talking about, the silence, is not telling them to calm down or take your tantrum to your room. It's, all right, what's going on? What's another way we can do this? Okay, what's a way we can handle this? What are some alternatives? Because in a lot of cases, it's not about losing the pencil. It's about the inability to deal with discomfort in the moment. And we have to teach them, because discomfort is everywhere. It's really problematic. I heard of one situation where a person was in a checkout line and their kid was like, hello, hello, kept saying hello to the cashier. And then the parent snapped it. The cashier was trying to work and they were getting their register together and everything. And the parent snapped at the cashier and said, can't you just say hello to my kid? And the thought that I was thinking while this parent was telling me this was that, well, you could also teach your kid to be okay when people don't respond to them immediately, because what's going to happen is that kid's now going to think that they're entitled to a hello every time, and it's going to create a conflict for them when they don't get their way. This comes from a beautiful hearted perspective. I want to teach my kid kindness, and I want to teach them how to be respectful, but not everybody else is like that.
That's right.
So when they come up against that now without the parent involved, they're going to have no idea how to handle that conflict.
And they'll have the expectation that their needs should be met all the time, every second, and that's unfortunately not the world we live in.
That silence is usually the idea that we're going to protect peace over honesty, so we don't talk about that. There really should not be any subject in a family household that you cannot talk about.
We can do age-appropriate levels of communication.
Exactly.
But to the best of our ability, we don't want to shut down communication. If a child shows an interest in learning about something, we want to do our best to share with them what we can so that door stays open. All right, so we talked about loud and confrontational families. We've talked about avoidant and silent families. The next type is our sarcastic or guilt-based communication styles. So this is where we use what we're trying to convey as humor to deflect what might be real pain. And that often comes through sarcasm. And we've talked about sarcasm in previous podcasts, that it's a maybe unintentionally, but sometimes intentionally mean way to try to communicate, when there are better and more appropriate ways to express your feelings to your family members.
Yeah, I heard a lot of this growing up. And you don't realize that it really does take the wind out of a kid when, like, for me, I can remember like the first time I got a better grade and all I got was, oh, it's about time. I told you weren't stupid. Does that sound motivating
Thank
to
you.
Yeah,
Thank you so
exactly.
much.
I told you weren't stupid. Yeah, that was a compliment. And to a kid, and to a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, that's not what we're hearing. We don't hear it the same way the adult thinks we hear it. So that goes back to one of our earlier shows with the intent and the impact. It doesn't make you tougher. It does not build character. It just makes you feel defeated. And it's where you get into these situations where I don't want to share anything with them anymore because it always comes up with some kind of negative response.
Yeah. So in families where we use sarcastic or guilt-based communication, that guilt is used to control the narrative so that the parents or the folks in charge can decide exactly how this conversation is going to go. And granted, parents have ultimate control over what is shared and when, but we really want to try to be as proactive as we can about that honest and straightforward communication. Because otherwise, what we teach is this model of indirect expression of emotion. Instead of coming out and saying, it really frustrated me that you came home late and didn't tell me you were coming late, you say, well, about time you got here. A child of certain ages won't know how to interpret that message. And so whatever you as the person making the sarcastic comment think you're conveying, you're probably not, which leads to more confusion and more communication problems.
And furthermore, that is not a helpful statement to anybody, even
true.
adult to adult.
That's
like a lot of the things that we do, it doesn't motivate an adult in a relationship to hear the same thing. It must be nice. I hear this all the time. The situations are different. At work, I've seen a lot of bosses do this where people have been working very, very hard and suddenly they get a break and that's when the boss walks in. They go, oh, it must be nice to just sit around all day. It's just like, none of that helps. None of that helps. It's not encouraging. It doesn't motivate an individual. Wow, you know what? I'm going to work harder next time.
That's right.
Take fewer breaks because I don't want him to think that. And there's a big difference between guilt is feeling bad about a situation, but shame is feeling bad about yourself because of that situation. And a lot of parents and a lot of leaders use that. And really all we're doing in those moments, what we call the absolute value of this particular behavior is we're just making people feel bad. And the reason that people continue to do it is because it appears effective, because the behavior stops. But that behavior stops because you're shutting that person down. It doesn't stop because they're motivated to do it. You're either shutting them down or you're teaching them to hide that behavior from them next time.
Yes.
It doesn't teach them any value in the conversation to where they can improve themselves or become better at whatever it is that's bothering you in that moment. So shame never works, and it's literally the most commonly used motivator in our communication. I honestly believe that it's pretty much why our communication is so poor, just from a human standpoint.
So some examples of things we might hear in a family that uses a lot of guilt-based or sarcastic communication are things like, must be nice to have it so easy, just sitting around here while I'm working all day. That message is confusing for folks. Children might not understand what it is they're supposed to be doing. If they happen to be sitting down after finishing their chores, then they're confused because they think that they've accomplished the things they were supposed to do, and now they're just not sure how to interpret that. Or to hear, after all I've done for you, I come in here and just find you sitting on the couch playing with your PlayStation.
Yeah, a lot of parents will personalize their own frustration and basically put that on the kids' shoulders. And a lot of times the kids have no idea what you're talking about. Like say they're running late and they consistently don't get ready. I mean, there's probably a lot of things you can put in place in order to help that occur, but it takes a little bit more effort to get that system in place. So if you're not trying to fix that system and your primary tool is to yell at them because they're always late, that's not going to fix it. And then, of course, when you personalize it and say, why are you doing this to me? I've heard that a lot. I heard that a lot growing up.
I believe that.
And honestly, it's confusing for a kid because we have no idea. I'm talking like I'm a kid right now. I'm back there in this moment, living in. That's almost the pure definition of trigger right there. So,
Yes.
So kids have no idea what you mean. They weren't around you. They were in their room playing. So how could they possibly be doing that to you? But as an adult, that's sort of your mantle to pick up on and learn to cope with that rather than dumping that on your kid, because the real problem there is your frustration, your inability to deal with these patterns that in a lot of cases, this might be where a lot of you just turn this podcast off and say, I'm done with it. But a lot of those things, they take more work, but in the long run, they really pay off. So if you're getting frustrated, but you're not initiating steps to try to fix that. And I have a case in point. One time, my son kept leaving his backpack at the school. You have to change those patterns in order to fix this problem. But you can never blame the kid for this. This is something that you can fix. So case in point, At the time, my son was leaving his backpack at school, and at the time I was dating somebody else. And like the third time he did it, I said, okay, buddy, let's go ahead and get your backpack. And we got in the car and we went back to his school. We picked up the backpack. But on the way home, I said, okay, what's your routine at school? And he said, okay, we get released from the last class. We go into the gym. I usually put my backpack up against the wall, and then we start playing basketball until our bus gets called. I said, okay, so there's time between when you get in there and when the announcements actually start. And he's like, yeah. I said, okay, so could you use that as the trigger point? When you start hearing the announcements, go get your backpack and put it on. So that was the fix. So how can we fix this system in order to move forward? And then when we got home, we had fixed it, and the person I was with is like, why do you just let him keep doing that? He needs to learn that he can't just leave his backpack at school. And I'm like, so what do you think punishing him is going to do? How's that going to improve his memory? How's that going to make him remember? And they didn't have an answer, but that's where I'm always thinking, because I was in the same situation. I used to get punished all the time for forgetting things or doing things wrong that I never had the direction of how to do it right in the first place. So I never learned from any of this. I just felt like I was basically just getting punished for being dumb. I mean, really, I hate to say it, but it's like, I don't know any better. I don't know why I don't know any better, but I keep getting in trouble for it. So, and this isn't me whining to you about my upbringing. It's just, if these patterns exist, we're not trying to shame anybody. These were the patterns that you were given, and we don't have manuals or special schools to go to that teach us how to get this stuff right. So we're just hoping that based on our research, we've come up with some good ideas that can help you, but we by no means want anybody to feel bad. I mean, we are literally trying to use podcasts to teach people not to use shame. So we would not want to be introducing shame. So if we can get you to change your perspective, I think we brought it up about critiquing in the past. I think we said in a previous show, you can either take this information and get mad at us for telling you because you see it as being a problem and you feel embarrassed or you feel ashamed, or you can beat yourself up, which once again is just perpetuating that shame on yourself now. Or of course, the last thing is just take the information, and see how can I use this to integrate it into my system.
So we've talked a little bit about the different ways that our early family models can influence the way we communicate. And it's not until we get newer, better information that we can figure out how to apply new tools. And that's, of course, what we're here to do today. So what we know about family patterns is that they feel normal. They're what we grew up with. So, of course, that's normal. That's how I grew up. But what we know about normal is it doesn't always mean healthy. I think we can all say that there are a thing or two that we have brought with us from childhood that's not the most normal way to handle a certain situation. Right? And that without awareness, patterns will just repeat themselves. So part of the excitement of learning new information, whether it's through reading articles or reading books or listening to podcasts, is that you can get new information, decide if any of it is relatable to you, and then apply those new things to sort of shift some of those patterns that maybe aren't serving you and make them more productive and give you a better place to hold communication with your whole family.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us, I know for a fact that some of the things that I swore I'd never say, it came out in a moment of frustration, or ultimately if the pattern in the moment triggered a childhood memory. I mean, in a lot of these cases, it will take you back. I mean, you can be a 40-year-old adult parent and something can take you back to a 16-year-old adolescent and you will respond that way. And I know that from personal experience and interacting with our clients, with the people that we have helped. But just stop and say, hey, I don't know why I reacted that way. I'm sorry. There's a better way that we can do this. So just move forward, because it is, like we said, this is something that's been put on you. It's something that you have absorbed. It's not something that you decided one day, I'm gonna talk down to my kid. I'm gonna try to see what happens when that and make them change their behavior. It's just all we know, which is why we're doing these podcasts, because in our research, the stuff that we've uncovered, it's like, why isn't there a universal class on communication? Because these things are simple. And once you start practicing them, and I gotta stress, a lot of this stuff is very easy to implement, but you have to try. And we are programmed to fear change. We are programmed to fear new experiences. So you have to take these things and at least attempt them before you dismiss them.
Yes.
And that's just me trying to be controlling and begging you to do something. I'm just kidding. But really, I mean, before you dismiss some of this stuff just because it's so different, attempt it. Sit down with your family and say, hey, how would you respond to this? I mean, they might say, actually, for me, it would sound better this way. And there you go. You bridge the gap. already. There's so many things you can do.
Yeah. And most of this change just starts with an open dialogue with your family members. And it may be the first time you've ever done that, actually seeking feedback from your spouse, your children, be they still underage kids or adult children, just starting to open up the conversation about what works and what doesn't, and demonstrating that receptivity just goes such a long way with the people in your family.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, we said there's 3 phases to this change in your behavior, and the first phase is usually catching it after. And usually in this particular podcast, that catch after is like, I sounded exactly like my father.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's where you're
Just heard my mother come
exactly,
out.
Exactly. So that's just awareness. There's no reason to trigger shame. Shaming on yourself is a choice. So make better choices. Yeah. So choose to build yourself rather than beat yourself down, because it really has it does not improve you. Exactly.
So in your adult relationships, what you might find with some of these patterns is that they show up in maybe silence during conflict. If you grew up in a family that was very avoidant of hard conversations, then as an adult in relationships, you might find that you just shut down during conflict.
Yeah.
Which you may think is helping you to avoid a painful interaction, but it's also helping avoid growth and the ability of practicing with your partner or your friend or your coworker, whoever it is, practicing communicating even when it is uncomfortable, so that you can stay honest and continue to grow and figure out what you need from each other.
And a lot of times in those moments when we feel embarrassed or we feel ashamed, we might say something like, well, I'll just keep my mouth shut. And that's just a passive aggressive response, saying that I don't like what you said to me, even though I probably believe that it's true and you're probably absolutely correct, but I don't want to give you that credit right now because I'm ashamed. But that doesn't help. Or in the middle of a discussion, if it doesn't go your way, a lot of people will immediately erupt and say, this is pointless, when it does not solve the problem. It goes back to the avoidance that we talked about earlier and the silence. But remember that when you don't address an issue, it's going to get worse.
It'll get bigger.
It's not only going to get bigger, it doesn't get solved, and the pattern's going to repeat.
Yes.
That's what I want.
Yes.
You're going to continue to argue about that. When we were learning some of these techniques, we found out that solving one problem solved 5 problems. Seriously. The communication style that we came up with to try to resolve the conflict, it's like, oh my gosh, we could apply that to so many different things. And this stuff has been put on us. We started out clean. We started out pure. We started out fresh, kind. And then these negative things were put on us, the sarcasm, the insecurity, the revenge kind of mentality, the fighting fire with fire, those kind of things. You feel released. You feel those things that have been put on you. You feel them coming off. You feel lighter. Like, this is so much less complicated when I don't escalate my own emotions in a moment and try to make that person feel like they've offended me or they've angered me or they've disappointed me in some capacity.
So not only will this show up in your adult personal relationships, but it can also show up in the workplace and with your leadership. So you might find that you or the people around you in your work environment avoid hard conversations. And again, the short-term goal of I don't want to be uncomfortable leads to the long-term detriment of we don't collaborate, we don't find ways to solve problems, and so we kick the can down the road, and the problem doesn't disappear, it just gets worse.
Yeah, and there are those that I had a supervisor that had to have their hands in everything. I mean, they knew less than I did about the topic, so when they got involved with some of the subject matter, they'd actually make it worse.
Right.
And they just had to control because of that level of insecurity that they had, and they thought that as long as their hands were in it, then they were safe.
That's right.
But really, it rarely turned out that way. And when it blew up because of their actions, I still got the blame. It was still my fault, even though I was trying to explain what the disruption was going to contribute to.
So we also might actually find ourselves recreating those same family dynamics at work. So if a lot of sarcasm and passive aggression was used in your family, then you might find yourself communicating that way at work just because you're trying to get some of that frustration out. But in the situation, it doesn't get to the root of the problem, and it doesn't help us have a healthy conversation about how to solve it.
Yeah, a lot of the styles that people use at home, like telling their kids that, oh, I'm really disappointed in your behavior today, it doesn't motivate them. And using that at work does not motivate the people at work. It just makes them shut up. It just makes them less communicative. And then you become a boss that ends up yelling, why wasn't I told about this sooner? And you don't realize that it's your fault.
You're the reason.
You're the reason because you either beat them down or you yell at them in some capacity. So it's not permanent.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
These are patterns that we're showing that you can change, and there are alternatives, and we encourage you. One of the things that we see, especially when we're dealing with people that are dealing with serious mental illness and we're crisis de-escalators, is that one of the tenets of our mental health thing is that we'll justify the feelings, but we will not condone the behaviors. And a lot of times we'll hear, what else am I supposed to do? And our first answer is, well, not that.
Not that.
Yeah. Not what you were doing.
Right.
But just because you don't have a positive alternative in the moment doesn't mean it's okay to continue with problematic behavior that you know is hurting yourself as well as others, because even though we're using this, it's still contributing to our own stress. If we're using a poor pattern of communication and dealing with our loved ones, our friends, and things like that, we're still creating our own stress.
Yeah.
So it's beneficial to learn how to deal with these things, because honestly, you can't, and we'll get to this later, but you can't control other people. The best thing you can do is be a model that influences others to want to comply with some of the things that, you know, that you find important. But a lot of times those controlling chaos things can really be problematic for a lot of people, especially adults. There's a lot of adults that think that they're okay to tell other adults, not in an authority position, what to do or how to do it. And as adults, we don't like it.
No.
When we're talking to these people, one of the questions we'll ask is, well, okay, how would you feel if somebody said that to you? And they're like, oh, well, I wouldn't take that. And they totally bypass the fact that they were doing it as well. It becomes like a new topic now.
That's right.
And they completely dismiss it. It's like, no, I'm trying to relate this to you. But it's really interesting. So just the best thing you could do is just try your best to create environments where communication is comfortable.
And sometimes it's as simple as just a little bit of vulnerable honesty. You're in an uncomfortable conversation with coworkers and tensions start to rise and people's voices start to escalate. It's a little bit awkward, but sometimes very helpful to say, look, I'm a little uncomfortable with the tone we're starting to take with each other in here. I want us to be collaborative. I'm not sure how to take the next step, but I know that we'll be able to solve this problem much easier if we remember to stay calm and be polite and listen to each other. Just something small to kind of reset the tone in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is where we want to sort of wind down now and talk about, you've learned these tools now, practice them. Talk to your close loved ones and say, hey, this has been a problem for me that every time I try to communicate with you, I seem to upset you. Use those I statements.
That's right.
Telling somebody, every time I talk, you get mad. Even that sounds like an I statement, but it's really not. But it's better to soften that with, when these topics come up, I feel like I'm making you uncomfortable. I don't want to do that. I just want to solve the problem, because it's obvious that this is a reoccurring theme.
Yes.
And if somebody is reacting defensively, then it's a deficit. Like we keep saying, if it's something that you bring up and you're reacting at an emotional level, then it's a problem. So what can we do to where this doesn't create an emotional problem? Because like I've said before, and I know it's not very eloquent, but somebody cussing you out to us is no different than a child calling us a poopy head. It's still an insult, but do you care? And when it gets into those situations where people are trying to provoke you, you have the ability to say, they're just trying to provoke me in this moment. I don't need to react. I don't need to force them to say, don't you dare disrespect me or any of that kind of stuff, because that's just pushing back. In the moment, you can model that calm behavior and they will pick up on it. And I guarantee you, it's been 100% of the times where I've been in these situations, and I do not stay calm to make another person feel bad. Keep it soft and say, I really want to soften this. And like I said, 100% of the time, they've come back and apologized for their behavior, because I didn't escalate also. They're like, I'm really sorry about that. And that's where you build respect, because you don't make them feel guilty about it. You don't act like, well, you owe me one now because I took your crap and I didn't give it back.
That's right.
Overall, it's going to model that behavior. And the next time, and I guarantee you that, like, when those things occur and they do apologize, they don't really much occur afterwards, because they know how it's going to go. So they work a little harder to try to stay calm too. So these are skills that you can learn, and through practice, they become natural, because it rewires your brain to respond differently. You're not reacting, you're not taking the amygdala and firing that up online. You're keeping that frontal cortex involved, and you're being constructive about your discussions.
Yeah, what we know about patterns, whatever they are, is that with a little bit of awareness or a little spotlight on them, we can change them. So we're not stuck with the bad or good habits we grew up with. We have choices that we can make to change the path. So there are some things that we can do to change the way we communicate with our families. And one of them is one of Honest Voice's favorite tools, which is the pause. Pausing before reacting. If you find yourself uncomfortable, frustrated, sad, angry, any of those emotions, pause before you react. And that can make the difference between a reaction that might have a permanent impact on one of your family members, or it provides you with an ability to model that pause so that your children and the other people that you're working with can see, oh, I don't necessarily have to say the first thing that comes into my head when I am frustrated or sad or hurt or whatever.
Yeah.
I can pause, collect my thoughts, and then continue.
Or you can say, after you've made the mistake, say, I need a second to respond. Or you can say, actually, I'm sorry. And this is the phase 2, realizing it in midway, like you're getting ready to do something wrong, but you stop yourself and you say, you know what? I want to say this differently. I want to say it in a way that will improve connection rather than put you on the edge or get you defensive in that moment.
Yeah. And what we know about change is that sometimes it does feel awkward and a little clunky before it starts to feel natural. And there have been hundreds of times that Todd and I have tried to restructure the way we've just finished a conversation. And at first it feels a little silly. It's like, hey, next time we're having that, I'm just going to say this instead. Okay, yeah, that'll help me feel less defensive. And even if it sounds a little silly, it shows on both sides that we are trying to work on a better path. And so even if we're laughing about it a little bit, that's positive interaction. And the next time we have that type of communication, it might even be a little bit sillier and lighter because we're practicing our new skills.
We've got a schedule of shows to do, but this might be getting ahead of us. But debrief. Man, nobody does that. Nobody talks about an argument after the argument's over because you don't want to readdress it. You don't want to take the chance of flaring it back up. But if you use these skills, that won't be a fear because you'll know that it's a constructive conversation. So asking these questions afterwards, it's like, man, I do not want to do that again.
Yeah.
Well, what's a better way I can say this? And show that attention. Say, I noticed when I said this, I saw your facial expression change. What were you thinking in that moment? And get into that insight, because we built up these things that we try to act like is strength, but it's really a deficit, and it's really based on fear. And as we keep saying, anger is a secondary emotion to fear. So these outbursts happen because people are afraid of something. Yeah. They're afraid of being exposed. They're afraid of what it says about them. They're afraid of what other people think in that moment about what's going on. So debrief this stuff and say, what is a better way to smooth that out? Because we don't know each other. You know, we are constantly learning. Every new situation that occurs with you and another person is different. It's not based on past experience. The only past experience you have is with the other people. The experience that you have with one person is the experience you have with that person. You can't carry it over to the next person, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. As always, we want to leave all of us with some reflection tips and something to practice. So this week, I want us to reflect on identifying one phrase or tone or habit that you inherited. It could be something as simple as leaving the room when people start to elevate their voices because it makes you uncomfortable. Just think about something that you might have inherited and ask yourself, does it help me or does it hurt me in my relationships today? Just a simple question.
Before you launch those questions, ask yourself, is it kind? Is it honest? And will this help anything? Because it's really important to make sure that you have that focus, because it's real easy to, a lot of people will say, I'm not trying to be a jerk right now. It's like, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Just stop them right there. Say, no, you're trying to preface it before you say something really, really bad. So there's no need for that. Instead of silence, say, hey, I want to talk about this.
So for practice this week, choose one pattern that you don't want to repeat, whether that is avoiding tough conversations or joking using sarcasm or raising your voice when you're trying to get your point across. And so when it shows up in your communication this week, pause and replace it with something else.
Yeah, instead of silence, say, this is a difficult topic, but I want to talk about this because I don't want it to be difficult anymore. And I will add also that it's only difficult because we've created it to be difficult. We've identified it as difficult. I mean, these things we should just be able to naturally talk about, but all of the things that have been put on us, we've created these scenarios where that's a tough subject or this is a hard phrase. None of that exists. Those are all things we've created. We've said this is a hard topic, but once you learn these tactics, I mean, we're around people that literally while we're communicating, people are like, what just happened? Because we've created a problem in the moment and we solved it in the moment. And people are like, Where was the argument? And then move on. Whereas they basically reflect on it themselves. It's like, I would have been so angry in that moment, or but that would have made me cry. It's like, oh no, they didn't mean it that way. We knew what we were saying in that moment. So this stuff can really be smooth. And sarcasm, that never helps anybody.
No.
I mean, instead of using sarcasm, stop yourself and just say, I'm actually feeling hurt right now.
Yeah.
Say those things. They're vulnerable because we've called them vulnerable, but they are just labels of your emotions in that moment. Just say, I'm actually feeling bad about this right now.
Yeah. In addition to being vulnerable, it's honest. And we can't change some of these patterns without telling the truth about what put them into place in the first place. I'm uncomfortable, I'm hurt, I'm frustrated, and then move forward from there.
Right. And when somebody starts elevating, as soon as they start raising their voice, say, look, I honestly, I can hear you, but I would rather solve this than fight about this. So can we regroup? Can we both take a deep breath and go back into this? Because really when someone's escalating, it's out of fear.
That's right.
They're afraid. They're embarrassed. They've never talked about this before. And remember, also, a lot of things that we call bad personality, or they're just difficult, things like that, it's really a lack of tools. I'm not excusing bad behavior. Like we say, we can condone the feelings, but not the behavior. But it starts from a place where it's the only thing they know.
Yeah.
And really, we should also get away from, as we've said in other shows, how could they not know that? I mean, that's not a question for us.
Yeah.
Our backgrounds are all completely different.
Exactly.
All right, so just remember, you don't have to pass down what's been passed down to you. You can break the cycle. You can change your ways. And once you start modeling that, believe it or not, that goes up the family generations as well as down the family generations.
So thank you so much for your time and attention today. We hope this has been helpful. As always, we'd love to hear from you. What we may have missed, what really hit home for you, any questions that you have, or any examples you'd like to talk through.
Yeah, and tell us what you didn't like. Tell us what you didn't agree with. One thing I want to say, because one of the things we do, we teach a lot about coping. Share it with us, but sometimes people will say, I don't like that. Is it an issue with inaccuracy? Like, did we say something that you disagree with because it's wrong? Or are you saying it because it didn't hit right with you? Because we've been in a lot of situations where somebody is like, I don't like the way you said that. And it's like, well, you don't like the way I said that because it's correct and you don't want to deal with that in the moment. It's not because I said it wrong. We have a tendency to what we call look the wrong way sometimes. So, okay, that's not on me. That's actually your issue. It's a deficiency in your ability to cope with that statement or expression rather than something that I've done wrong.
But we also know that our experience is not everyone's experience. So if there are things that we have missed or something that you just really think we should learn more about or understand a little bit better from your experience, we are so open to hearing about that.
Yeah, and if nothing else, if you want clarification, can you give me some feedback on why this bugs me so much? We'll do our best. We don't know you, but we'll try to do our best based on the context of what you're saying. I will say here, we don't like to use the word troll. Honestly, that seems insulting, and I get why it's being used. But these are individuals that have trouble dealing with a lot of the things that we're talking about internally. So it's one of those things where you get slapped and you say, it didn't hurt, even though you're aching. Yeah. And that's where a lot of that kind of communication comes from. So if you're emailing us stuff about how we look or what we're wearing or the way we talk or my voice is just grating on your nerves, it's not going to be constructive and we won't respond to those, okay? Right. Your words will be heard. So we'll let you know that because that's what we do. We don't dismiss anybody, but try to keep it constructive to where we can all grow together because that's what we're pushing for. We respond a lot to some of the BuzzFeed articles, so be looking for honest voice in the responses there because we're trying to provide neutral responses and try to reduce that negative reactivity to some of these important topics. I think BuzzFeed has a lot of really great communication articles in it where you're like, where a lot of people should be reading those and say, oh, I do that. I'm going to stop that now. Yeah. So that's all I got.
So thank you again for another great episode, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. We'll talk about man talk. Bye now.
Bye.